Kia ora koutou. Te whare tūranga ki tūnei, tēnā koe, ngā tangata whenua o tēnei rohi, ngai tua huriri, ngai tahu, kāti māmoe, waitaha, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. E ngā hoe whā, ngā iwi o te motu, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Greetings everybody, and thank you very much to the organisers for the invitation to speak. I realise I wasn't the first choice as keynote speaker, but when cabinet ministers are going down like ninepins, there are a few of us mere mortals left to fill in the gaps. Nonetheless, I'm delighted to be here and I feel privileged to be asked to speak. So again, thanks to the organisers. Up in the rohi of Kahungunu, on the east coast of Te Ika a Maui, near the settlement of Porongaho, is a hill which has the claim to fame as with the longest place name in Aotearoa, New Zealand and the world. It's Taumata, Whakatangihanga, Kauaua o Tamatea po kai whenua ki Tāna Tahu. The brow of the hill where Tamatea po kai whenua, that is Tamatea who strode the land. That differentiates him from the other Tamatea. So Tamatea, who strode the land where he played his nose flute to his lover. If you visit there today, you find the name is even longer. Locally, we have included other exploits of Tamatea in the name. And if you're standing there in front of the mountain with the, front of the hill with the place name, you've got to use a wide-angle lens to get it all in. So, suffices to say that Tamatea was renowned. So in that name is Tamatea po kai whenua, Tamatea who strode the land. And that is his claim to fame. He was renowned for his walking exploits around the North Island, around Te Ika a Maui. And he came over from Hawaii on the Takitimu canoe. He was the father of Kahungunu, who gave his name to the tribes of the East Coast that the area in which we refer to today as Wairarapa and Hawke's Bay. And so he's certainly big in Kahungunu, but he's big across all of Māoridom as this great walker, this man who, and if you read about his exploits, they're pretty astonishing. So he was a famous traveller on foot, our first great walker in Aotearoa and our first great tramper. And I will say in passing that I'm not saying that all you need to go tramping with is a kauaua, a nose flute, and a lover, but you could do a lot worse. Now, I mention this because I see this Living Streets Walking Summit as a celebration of travel by foot in the way nature intended. In other words, to invoke the spirit of Tamatea po kai whenua. And if walking streets had the equivalent of a patron saint, I'm sure it would be this great man, Tamatea po kai whenua. So I've got three things I want to sort of talk about a little bit, about just my tramping, my experiences as a teacher, and then talk about free public transport, and then a little bit about Te Araroa. So my tramping, I do quite a lot of tramping and walking when I'm able to. As a former teacher, I've taken many groups tramping on multi-day walks, staying in huts, etc. And when I come across former students, they never remember a single thing I taught them in the classroom, but they always remember the tramps. They remember how tired they were when they got to a hut. They remember the food group they were cooking in, and they remember what they cooked and what it tasted like. And I have to say, with my experience as a teacher, I've tasted lots of student cooking in situations like this, and a lot of it's pretty dreadful. But they remember these things. However, health and safety these days is making simple experiences like this much more of a challenge for teachers in schools. In my first year of teaching in 1978, myself and another teacher and his wife, I was at Massey High School, and they had this thing at the end of the year called Wider Living Week, where all students, that's what's now years 9 and 10, would choose something to do for the week, some outdoor activity. So I volunteered to take a tramp, and myself, another teacher and his wife, the three of us took a group of 20 students, and we tramped around Lake Waikaremoana. No one asked me if I had any tramping experience at all. There were no health and safety things to take note of. There were no risk assessments to do. We were just trusted to use our common sense if we got into difficulties. And we did use our common sense, and we got into very little difficulties over the years. As I say, it's becoming much more difficult now. I think it was that high trust model, I guess. I mean, all we did, we sent home a note to parents, and the parents signed based on a couple of paragraphs. We're going here, and we need you to sign here to agree, and we need you to pay for it. So that was all the involvement which parents had at that time. And I think the more I see of our young people these days spending all this time on screens. And I think it's an absolute tragedy that we don't have much more of this kids getting out into the outdoors. In schools these days, these activities tend to be confined to a kind of a choice. You get if you want to do in year 12, you want to do the subject of outdoor education, then you do it as a separate subject. But every kid needs these experiences. Christchurch is blessed, I think, with the Port Hills. I think the Port Hills are the saving grace of Christchurch, I have to say. I've lived here for 10 years now, and for me it's a saving grace. If you go up there anytime, you find people walking and cycling and doing all kinds of activity up there, all without artificial propulsion from fossil fuels. So as the introduction said, Tim said in the introduction, I quite often, once every couple of weeks, I go for a walk over to Littleton, over the hills. There's multiple ways to go up and go down, and it's a real delight to be able to do it. And I think it's just great for your mental and your physical health as well. However, I haven't done all of Christchurch 360 yet. Now, Colin Merck's here, and Colin is been the driver of Christchurch 360. So I see he's speaking later on. So take close notice of what Colin says. I haven't yet, but I will. It's on my list of things to do. So perhaps the human behaviour, which is the antithesis of this living streets walking summit, are new subdivisions where middle-class parents drive their kids to school and then drive to work, rarely leaving their car's small bubble to interact with other people, and then driving home the same way. And during work days, they typically only interact with others outside of work and home when they go to the supermarket. And aside from anything else, when you're taking a ton of metal, plastic, glass and rubber with you wherever you go, it's simply not sustainable. And that ton of metal and glass and plastic is, of course, a car. I've always been a keen supporter of free public transport because of the multiple benefits. I've run for mayor in Auckland and Christchurch with the aim of pushing good policies like this to the fore, with a little bit of success, I have to say. I should say, I ran to get these policies up and discussed. And my wife said to me when I first stood, she said, "If you become the mayor of Christchurch, I'm moving to the West Coast." And I said to her, "Yes, so am I." The idea was to get these big ideas out there, get people talking about them, getting them discussed. And I think we were able to push along the argument to some extent. So what are the main benefits? They're environmental and social. Getting people out of cars and into trains and buses is so important for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and the exploitation of resources to produce more cars. I'm always amazed every night I look at TV and see the number of advertisements for new cars. I'm absolutely gobsmacked by it. And the figure I think I saw a couple of years ago where New Zealand sold, I think, 60,000 new SUVs and 4,000 electric cars. We've got a hell of a long way to go. There'll be someone out there who maybe will set me right if I've got that wrong. I've got those figures wrong. The social benefits are both income related, so that people on low income spend more of their income on transport than other groups, as well as the social benefit of having a daily shared experience with other people. Even if you don't talk to people personally, just being in the same space as people on a bus or a train is important in social connections, and I think in building empathy within a society. Now, transport planners tell us the biggest complaint from bus users around Aotearoa is not the cost of travel, but the reliability and the lack of frequency in the services. And I get that, but for me, free and frequent public transport and comfortable low emissions trains and buses, etc., is the way of the future. And if we make them free, that's the first step. And then you create this upward spiral where you get more people wanting to be on them, you get pressure for greater frequency and improved services, and you get an upward spiral, which I think is the way to go. And of course, free public transport will also benefit those who would never darken the inside of a bus shelter. And that's because more people on public transport means less congested roads for other people who are determined to use their cars. So how does this tie in with living streets? Well, walking to public transport before and after school and work is all part of it. The connections of people on the street is enhanced on public transport, and the reverse is true as well. So when I was doing this list, I looked through the leaflet that I used for the last campaign here for free public transport, and we had bullet points, a list of bullet points, all the benefits of free public transport. So here's what I wrote, okay? So there's about 10 of them. Can you believe it? Well, you can. 10 of them. What are the benefits? First one, cleaner and greener. This may well be the single most important green policy in the history of Aotearoa, New Zealand. I firmly believe that. Less pollution, a smaller carbon footprint, and big ups for the environment. No extra charges for anyone. No rate increases, no extra fuel taxes, no congestion charges, no network charges, no toll roads. It would all be paid from the regional transport funding, where the balance shifts from roads to public transport. At the moment, we subsidise trucks on our roads. Every 8-tonne axle does the same damage to the roads as 10,000 cars. Each 8-tonne axle, 10,000 cars. Now, some of the big trucks, I was biking here along Brougham Street today. That's the main road out to Littleton for those who are from outside town. And these huge 60-tonne trucks, I think 60 tonne is now the legal sort of maximum, they can have 7 or 8 of these 8-tonne axles loaded up. So each one of those trucks is doing damage to the roads equivalent to 50 or 60,000 cars. We are subsidising these people. A roading builder said to me once, it's not so much the building the road in the first place for trucks as opposed to cars, but he said the maintenance is just incredible. And Brougham Street's been dug up so many times in the time that I've been in Christchurch. It's clear that we are subsidising the trucking industry. And the trucking industry, the people who complain, you never make money out of trains. Well, we never make money out of roads, that's for sure. So with that little aside, that was the third point. Improved productivity. Road and congestion costs Christchurch tens of millions in lost productivity every year. And I saw a figure for Auckland when I was campaigning up there, something like $1.5 billion in lost productivity from congestion there. Faster bus travel. No time wasted collecting fares. The bus driver gets in and drives the blooming bus and stops it when people want to get off and when people want to get on. Revitalising central Christchurch and the central cities of any city where this is put in place. More people can travel to enjoy the central city, Littleton and the city beaches. A couple of years ago in Christchurch, they had a free public transport day on a weekend, and a neighbour of mine lives up the road, came down to me especially to tell me he'd got on a bus to go to Littleton. And he said the bus was full of families from the east of Christchurch who had never been to Littleton before in their lives. But free public transport meant they got out there and they got back. And of course, there'd be a lot more people in the inner city here if that applied. saving for people of money, the equivalent of an extra 4 weeks' pay a year would be the benefit for families from free public transport. And economic stimulation. People have more money to spend in the real economy rather than spending it on petrol. Increased social cohesion, which I've already mentioned. Free Wi-Fi. Now, I think Invercargill was the first city in New Zealand to introduce free Wi-Fi on their buses. And I haven't seen that being promoted in other places like Christchurch. It should be. You know, we need to make free public transport as attractive as possible for all of us. And a tourism boost. This was the last point. As tourists relish the chance to see all parts of Christchurch on free public transport. So what other cities around the world are doing it? There's piles of cities around the world which have at least part of their networks free of charge. I think there's one of the fourth biggest city in China, which I cannot quite recall its name. It has 4 of its main transport routes into the city all free. And places like even Melbourne. Melbourne has free public transport in the inner city with their trams. Tallinn in Estonia has been doing it for years, and Dunkirk in France has put it in place. It's not difficult to do. It takes political will. We got halfway there when we had COVID, and the government said we're going to halve public transport fares. Well, I think the government should go the whole hog and see that as something which is based on a very strong social benefit for the whole community, as well as environmental benefits. It ticks all the boxes. So, now Te Araroa. I had the opportunity to walk Te Araroa when I retired. I retired on the 12th of December 5 years ago, and on the 13th of December, I took a flight to Kaitaia and then got a drive up to the Cape Reinga and started the walk. It was my retirement present to myself. It wasn't terribly popular with my wife. It was respected, but it wasn't terribly popular. Five months away from home is quite a big deal. But it was a marvellous experience. I heard Bruce Hopkins, the actor. I saw him on Brokenwood Mysteries just recently. Bruce Hopkins, the actor, said that he was interviewed on Radio New Zealand, and he said, they asked him what 3 words would sum it up, and he said, it is brutal, it is relentless, and it is magnificent. And I sort of agree with all those things, but I would downgrade the brutal bit, right? Because I'm going to convince you in a minute that you all need to take on this challenge. The thing is, not a day goes by that I don't think of some aspect of that experience. Of what it was for me. It was an epic adventure in the spirit of Tamatea Pōkai Whenua. I can think, if I spoke to you, I could recall every single day of that trip, where I started from, where I was tramping, where I'd stayed, where I went to. I couldn't quite tell you what I ate for lunch every day, but I wouldn't be that far off it actually, because you remember things very, very clearly. So let me just give you a small taste of the flavour of it, and encourage you all to give it a go. So I was a sobo, which is a southbound walker. If you're going north, you're called a nobo. So there's this sort of lingo, sobos and nobos. Yeah, hobos as well, maybe, I'm not sure. So the nobos were the people you met the other way. Now, I started from the north, and 90 Mile Beach, I mean, everyone says this, if you can do 90 Mile Beach, you can do the whole thing. It's not a problem. And 90 Mile Beach is surprisingly, very surprisingly, even to me, had its real challenges and difficulties. And the reason is, it's not 90 miles, it's about 60 miles. I think it's about 90 Ks along there. And it breaks up into about 3 days. But the problem with walking on 90 Mile Beach is when you're walking on flat sand, it's nice, easy walking, but your feet are in the same place all the time. If you're tramping, your feet are going all over the place. You're walking on tracks, you're going here, there, and everywhere. But if you're going on the beach, you get this. I got blisters. Never had blisters for, 30, 40 years. I got blisters right under the sole of my feet. the whole of the ball of my foot on each foot became blistered. And what you do with blisters is you simply put leukoplast on them, you bind them up, and you forget about them. You have high expectations of your body to deal with it, and your body deals with anything. I was a bit worried about my left knee. I'd had trouble with that on a couple of tramps where it swelled up and it was really painful. And I thought, is this going to stand up? As you go along, your body gets stronger and stronger. Your ligaments get stronger. Your muscles get stronger. You become fitter. I never had a problem with anything like that. In fact, things got better and better the more I went along. So the other difficulty with 90 Mile Beach is that it was very hot when I was up there. It was in the middle of December. And on 90 Mile Beach, there is no shelter. There is no water supply on the beach. There is when you come to the end of the day. And it's baking hot. So when you stopped, you sat on the sand. There were no trees. The trees were in an exotic forest, probably, a kilometre away. You sat on the beach and, man, it was just baking. It was really difficult. And as you walk along the beach, the profile of the beach does not change. So the beach looks exactly the same. And so all those things conspire for it being quite a relatively difficult experience. Not so much walking, but, the other things that go with it. But still, it is... I hope I'm not putting you off. Am I putting you off? It wasn't my intention at all. But just saying that, no, it's marvellous. I'm telling you the hard bits now. So, telling you about this trip is a bit like, when you go to someone's place and they show you 100 pictures from their latest holiday, and you think, holiday snaps from someone else. You weren't there. It doesn't mean so much. But I'll just give you a little bit of maybe a couple of things. So probably the most heartwarming interaction I had, and something that goes perhaps to the heart of the spirit that we're talking about here with living streets and living communities. The most heartwarming interaction I had on the trip was up on in the far north near the coast, just up from Whangarei. So it was near Ngunguru, I think, just up there on the way down to Ocean Beach, those who know the sort of area. And you had to get up very early in the morning, to get up very early, 4 o'clock in the morning, because there were 3 places where you had to cross at low tide. And to get through all 3 of them at low tide, it was going to take getting up at 4 in the morning. So I did. And I got to the 3rd one, which was a very long walk across mudflats in estuary. And so you go along about a kilometre along the mud flats. They say don't sit near the don't walk near the sides because it's all muddy. You've got to walk right in the middle. So walked out in the middle, and then you turn. So I was going south, and then you turn to the west along maybe another couple of kilometres on the sand. And so the first kilometre takes you out to the middle, and then. And I was on that second section going towards the west, and you're right out in the middle of this enormous mudflat, and there were a few houses over on the right-hand side, and I could hear kids shouting, kids playing. I looked over, I couldn't see anyone there, but anyway, I thought, it was just part of the day. It was a beautiful day, so I'm walking along there, and this noise from these kids kept going, and I didn't take any notice. I just kept bowling along. And then you get to a point where they say, in the notes it said, make sure you line up these posts so you end up at the right place. You might end up too far over wherever. So I turned around to line up these posts, and lo and behold, there were these 2 kids racing, following me across the mudflats. And I thought, my God, I must have dropped something. And these kids racing after me I'm something on the mudflats. Anyway, so I stopped and sort of walked back towards them. And the first one arrived. There were 2 girls. They were about 12 years old. And one of them, the first one, she was wearing a dressing gown and a nightie. And she had bare feet, and her clothes were spattered with mud because she was racing along and flicking up mud onto her clothes. And anyway, in her hand she had this dinner plate, and she had two toasted sandwiches on it. And she said, after she recovered her breath, she said, "These are for you," she said. And she said, "This one's bacon and cheese, and this one's cheese and onion in case you're a vegetarian." I thought, hell. I thought maybe this is some kind of high pressure selling going on here. So I said to her, "How much do they cost?" And she said, "Oh no, they're not. There's no cost. They're for you because you're doing this wonderful trip on Te Araroa." Of course, anyone with a pack on their back walking across these mud flats, they know immediately it's someone doing Te Araroa. So I thanked her profusely. I took the cheese and onion sandwich, and it was very nice. And these two girls, whenever they see anyone, whatever they've got there, they grab some biscuits or they grab some bread. In my case, this was their breakfast they were cooking, and they raced out after me with these toasted sandwiches. So those are some of the experiences which you get along the way. They're really, as I say, really heartwarming. So I'm just going to say a few last things that I think are important, things that will hopefully encourage you to give this a go and be inspired by tamatea pōkai whenua. So when I wrote them out, and when I'd written them out, I realised they all start with the word "don't." So see what you make of them. Don't worry about your fitness. In fact, don't even try to get fit before you start. Te Araroa is a trip which gets you fit along the way. Within a few days, within a couple of weeks, you will be as fit as a fiddle. And let's face it, if you can walk for one day, you can walk for 150 days, right? So don't worry about your fitness. Secondly, and that fitness means like me with my leg, I might think, oh God, is my leg gonna? Don't worry about it. It'll take care of itself. Second one, don't worry about accommodation. Just take a small tent and you can stop anywhere. Don't worry about the cost. It was cheaper for me to be on Te Araroa than to stay at home. They said you need about $10,000 to do the whole trip. It cost me $5,800. And over that time, I got more money came into my bank account than I could cope with, through National Super. And I think the other thing is I come across a lot of people like this who say, I'll just give it a week or so and I'll see if it's too tough. And if it's too tough, I'll give up. You should never start out like that. You start out saying, I'm going to do that 150 days. And all the people who say, I'm just going to give it a wee go, they give it up within 2 or 3 days. Yeah, because you are going to get tired. You are going to get, you are going to feel a bit stuffed. And it's so easy to give up if you've given yourself that out. Don't give yourself the out. Just do it. So I'm going to finish now, and I'm not sure if a keynote speaker is allowed to ask for questions or comments, but I'm going to do that anyway. I'll leave the remaining time for those for questions and comments. So, nō reira, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou, kia ora.